Welcome back to another episode of Why Do I Do That? Today I have Bella Reynolds here, who is my unofficial auntie. She's not actually related to me at all. But we met because her daughter actually booked a session with me, and then her other daughter, and then Bella came to see me, and then Bella actually ended up studying the certification, and we've just become like friends slash related, but not related. So Bella is a midlife mindset coach. And as I mentioned, she has studied the Aaruka Certification. So welcome, Bella.
Thanks, Jess. It's quite surreal to be here with my mentor and teacher, guide, and also, healer.
It's surreal for me too. I'm really excited for today's episode because I just feel like you speak so directly and so well. Anytime I watch your content when you were doing your podcast, I was like, you're such a good speaker. So I'm excited for you to help me to unpack this person's question, which I think is going to relate to so many people, which is, why do I feel the need to hide who I really am? So if I was to ask you that question, if I was sitting here and I was a client and I was like, Bella, why? Why do I always feel the need to hide who I really am? What would be the first thing that pops into your mind?
So I think the first word that comes into my mind is very much protection.
Yeah.
Okay. I think immediately if you're hiding who you really are, like your true authentic self, and authenticity is something that we're told to really bring to the table these days. And it's like, yeah, easier said than done.
Yep.
To me, it's protection, and it goes so much deeper than that. And for me, it is very much about, from the minute you can pretty much start to think about your desires in life, before you're probably even walking, I think your well-meaning parenting environment, whatever, will start to mold you around who they need you to be. So very, very early on, and this is not a dig at them, this is just, it's for them protection and survival that they can parent you, that they're very much about, look, you might want that, but that doesn't really suit me right now. And so therefore your desires you start to realize that what you might really want, which is a reflection of who you really are, may not actually be how you get your needs met. So I think that goes all the way through, and it's fascinating. I mean, I love this question because it is amazing with any client I work with. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what they come in for me to work on them with. Ultimately, they are just seeking that permission from self to be their real them. Like I just want to be my real me. And some of them have no memory of what that was like. You have to really get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first thing that I thought of was like, it's because you're taught that in order to be loved and accepted, you have to be who your parents want you to be. And there's that question, I think it's a Tony Robbins question. It's like, whose love did you crave the most? And then it's like, who did you have to be to get that love? And so we're taught, bringing it back to what you said about protection. Protection is something that's coming from needing to survive. And in order to survive, we have to be accepted by the people that are looking after us. So it's like, even unconsciously, like we don't obviously do this, consciously and be like,
Not at
if
all.
I don't do this, my mum's not going to love
No.
me or my dad's not going to love me. That's just wired into us. But it's like, whenever I cry, my dad gets angry, or whenever I whinge, my mum does this, or whenever I say that I want to, even if you think about like when kids get interests, and I know that I've seen parents do this still now today. I can't believe people are doing it, but kids are interested in something and their parents are like, oh, why don't you do that instead? Why don't you, like, instead of playing guitar, why don't you join the football team? Or, and so from their reactions, from just watching their reactions, seeing their reactions, and from them guiding you, you just go, oh, well, obviously they don't want me to do that. They're not going to love me. I should do what they want me to do, because we just crave that love.
Yeah, and it's safety, right? Like it's safety it's quite a dish at the moment, I think we're saying on parents, but it is really what it's about in those younger years, right? It's about, oh, well, I've learnt that response to that, so then I'll do this. I think what's really fascinating too is that I don't believe it's a linear process. I don't think, from that young age you start getting molded and then you don't test the boundaries on desires and who I really are. Because, I mean, that is what, adolescence is really about. So another thing that came up for me when I was considering about this is about ridicule. Like, again, it's safety. I can keep myself safe. I don't want, all humans are wired to conform. And ironically, we take a while. I think that's part of the process of life to work out our tribe. So if we're not conforming in the tribe that we're in and we can't find the tribe we really want to be in, if you stand out there and be different from anyone, you are up for ridicule. And it, often we go, oh, those people, they're so lucky because they've, they're just so happy being themselves. I bet there is not one human on the planet that has not had to work through how they become their real self to the world.
Yeah.
I certainly know that's been my story. So, yeah.
It's brave.
Very brave.
It's brave because that's like Brene Brown. Like, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked,
yes.
And it's everyone that is out there showing themselves, it's vulnerable as well to be who you truly are. Because if you're putting on, I think about, like, if I'm putting on a mask and I'm being who you want me to be, and then you criticize that, I'm not really going to be that offended because I'm like, well, that's not really who I am. I was just being that person. But if I'm 100% showing up as myself and then someone criticizes that, that's like, ooh, that's a little bit harder to handle.
Yeah.
But that comes back to, like, and there has been a question on the podcast about, like, why do I care more about what other people think? And this is kind of coming into that category, but it's like, what's the worst thing that could happen if you show up as yourself? And, what do you think that could be? Like, what are we so afraid of at the bottom of that? Because
I think safety. I'm not safe.
Yeah.
I mean, if all through my, education with you, which was, fabulous to do, the 4 core beliefs and that I am not enough and I am not safe, that I am not safe to be me is what I think really, drives that. And you get to, and I think the thing I really love that, working in the midlife space, as I said, when clients come to me, particularly in that space, they've got to that point that the pain of not being who they really are or dealing with whatever it is they've come to you with, which it may be related to weight loss, it may be related to business performance, it may be related to finding a loving partner, whatever they come to you with, whenever I work with them about the new identity they're really looking for, it actually comes back to the true identity of being the real me.
Yeah.
So I think you get to that, it's that seesaw.
Yeah.
And, particularly when you're younger, you're much more influenced, the vast majority of us.
Yeah.
So the pain of staying in that is definitely worth having than the pain of going out of that zone.
Do you think that the pain of putting on the mask, we'll call it, gets heavier as you get older?
I don't think it does for everyone. I think, and that's why I'm always in awe of any client I work with. And it sounds a bit twee and life coachy when I say it to them up front, and you would do it too. It's like, good on you. You have stepped up to say, I actually want more, better, different. So I think the pain of whether we'd move forward on it or not, just for those, I think there's often a trigger point with it. There may be life change.
Rock bottom.
Yeah, exactly. But also another thing I was listening to is there's always an inkling. I think the people that do end up moving through and dealing with this, particularly midlife and beyond, they've always had an inkling that, and it may have been suppressed, through, trauma or whatever, but they've always had an inkling that they could actually deal with this, but they've never honoured the inkling. And then something will be a catalyst. Then the pain is just like, oh, stuff it. I'm not dying wondering. I think it's part of that, isn't it?
I also think about, like, because I do notice in friends and family, and I have noticed in myself, that as you get older, you start to care less.
Yes.
And I always wondered why. I don't know if it's just like maturity, or do you have any idea on why? Like, why do you think people would care less as they get older?
I'm not completely sure across everyone, because I think it's interesting. Some people care less because they really start to lose part of their faculties and their filters, and they just care less,
Just
but
like
they don't even realize. And their family members are looking at it going, or hearing them and going, oh my God, that filter is
shut
gone.
up. Yeah.
So they're not, I don't think what your question was probably more about the conscious, those who start to consciously go.
Like you just start to think, who cares about what people think?
Well, and I care more about how I actually feel about myself than I feel that others feel about me.
Yeah.
And I think those that consciously do it as we get older, I do think we start to get a feeling about limited time. And once again, it's a privilege in our Western world that we've got this level of self-actualization available to most of us, that when a lot of our other needs are met, it's like, okay, I can now choose to work on myself. And so that, part of the process of support you give them too is just normalizing it's okay to put yourself first. So I think on an age thing, if you are aware of limited time or there's been a burning inkling to do something or whatever, as you get those runs on the board, or you get that level of confidence, or you do actually get, accrue, some financial security and other pieces, then it's like, okay, now I can deal with some of this stuff. I think that's what it is with age.
Limited time. When you said that, I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
oof, because I've always had, and some people have it from a younger age, and I think that's probably what's got me to where I am. But I've always had this, not a fear of losing time, but a very conscious that every day is precious and that you need to make the most of it. And I think having felt like I wasted the first 30 years of my life, not wasted, but, spent it in fight or flight, I'm so conscious of time and I think self-growth comes with that, because you know that to experience life to the fullest, and in order to experience life to the fullest, you do actually have to show up as your true self, because if you're putting it on, it doesn't feel the same. So I've always had that, like, oh, okay, I'm going to make the most of the next 30, 40, 50 because I've got time to make up for. But a lot of people don't have that. If you've just kind of been coasting along, it can be hard to have that kind of catalyst, which we were talking about this last night. I actually feel blessed that I've had so much trauma that was the catalyst to that growth. But some people don't ever look at it, deal with it, or have that prompt.
It's interesting what you just said there before with regards to your health that came up. I think that's another thing as you do get that little bit older, your stats on having some form of health crisis does happen. And we call it blindsiding, like literally something. And, 50s on, from 50s to 70s, you are in the zone, really. And it's pretty much 45. It doesn't mean in your 40s you don't have it, but as you get those, extra miles on your dashboard, something is going to create a catalyst for change, whether you like it or not. I think that's a really big one. And so when you just said that point about really being grateful for every single day, I haven't met anyone that's got through a health issue that hasn't. That's been their major shift. And that's why they don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's all about them. As in, I am here. I am here now,
I get
wide
to live
awake
life.
And open, and I am going to go hard.
Yes. Yeah. Embracing every day. So if somebody, like, we kind of unpacked the why a little bit and we've gone on a few little tangents, but if somebody is the person who's asking this question thinking, why do I do that? Like, why can't I just show up as the real me? There's also a how. Like, how the fuck do I do that? Like, how do I just show up as the real me? Because, my perception of that would be, well, you need to figure out who you want to be, first of all, and that comes from desire. I always say to my clients, who you are meant to be is who you desire to be. So really tap into like those deep desires, and that's going to lead you there. But that's not like, that's quite far down the path. Like, what's the first step, or what would be your first step for somebody who's like, I want to show up as my true self, but I just keep putting on the mask? Like, what would be your first advice to them as a life coach / Aaruka healer / all the things?
I think, and this is, I'm just so grateful for all the trainings I've done in, certainly the last 5-6 years. My answer to this in my early days would have been, you just write it down, set the goal and go hard. And now we know so much about our brain and how habits are developed and consistency, etc.
That's like kind of push approach,
like that
mindset, do better.
That's a grind attitude,
not
rather
a trauma-informed
than a glide.
approach.
No, and not trauma-informed at all. Because let's be brutally honest, if you were able to flip the switch like that so quickly, you would have.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so things are holding you back. But once again, there's so many ways that you can address it. But if you're listening to this and you literally go, Jess is in my head right now and Bella is like answering some of the stuff, right? So I'm going to do something from today. To me, it is absolutely writing down in a journal, and journaling is fundamental. You're either writing it with a pen or you're doing it on your phone. It doesn't matter what generation it is. Or you might even verbally be getting it out. Whatever it is, you are going to get out the best possibility right now of who you would love to be. Like, you just literally do that. Now, that could be in words, or it could be one sentence, whatever. Just get something out.
Do you know what I did just off the back of that?
Yeah.
What I did was when I was like going through identity work, which is essentially what this person's talking about. When I was going through identity work, I started to think about the people that I loved in my life and what I loved about each of them and how I wish I could be. Like I have one friend who just is so optimistic. She's like, I think of her as like sunshine, and she would always just show up in a certain way. She was always cool. She was always like, and then there was another friend that was really direct, and she just said whatever the fuck she thought. And all of the things were completely contrasting, but I had a desire for each of them and literally started to work on, well, why can't I be that? And yeah, so I thought about off the back of what you were just saying, the people who I want to be like is a really good, if you're like, oh, I don't even know, start to think about who do you look at and go, I wish I could be like that.
Yeah. And you're basically picking attributes, right?
Attributes, yeah.
And there could be an element of this listening. People might listen and go, oh my God, that is so, it's almost like engineered. And it's like, yeah.
It's supposed to be. You have to engineer your best self.
Well, you do. And that's another really interesting, because I was thinking about the difference between best self and real self.
Yeah.
And there's a lot out there about being your best self.
Real self.
And it is actually about real self, because if you are being your real self, you are your best self.
I think they're the same, but like
they are. But we talk about the other.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to it. Once you've got the attributes, and it's a beautiful thing you brought up too, because if you have got it down so low, or your mask is so solid, even asking what do you want, because that's the other thing, was what do you really want? I don't even know what I want. Well, here we go. You are needing this now.
Yes.
Then it start with something tiny, like literally looking at those attributes. So what's a really good example of this? Say that they wanted to be more joyous. What do you reckon would be something that someone might, well, if you think back to your example, what was one of those attributes that you saw that you didn't currently have at the time, but you wanted to bring that in to be more you?
Yeah. So one of them was, I think the directness was like a big one.
Yeah.
I had a friend who just like literally, I'd be at her house and she would just like grab my arm and be like, I think you've been here for too long and I'm really tired. I want you to go home.
Boom.
And I would be like, oh, fuck, like, ouch. But then I was like, oh, I actually love that about her. And I wish I could do that. And so that was one thing for me that I was, her directness.
So there's a classic example of it. For you to bring that in originally, like initially, because I think you would do that all the time.
I do it now, but it was so hard.
Exactly. So if we're creating this new habit loop, and the trigger is I'm literally I'm feeling this right now, I'm thinking this right now, the old me would just shut up, people please do whatever, whereas the new you wants to test it, find someone that is the safest and most beautiful person you could test it on in a safe environment and try it out.
Yeah.
And now you may not get success in the first time, but if you pick the right person, I'm pretty sure you will get the right person to do it with and get that first one. That becomes, dopamine gets hit off. We've got this start to track. We've got a tiny little habit, neural pathway starting to develop.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, within the next 24 hours, you try it again.
Yes.
You try it again. Or do it when you're at the coffee shop. Or, do it with strangers, that you really don't have. But just start really, really small and start getting wins on the board.
Yes. And off the back of that, sit in the discomfort because it's like, we can say like start doing it but you'll do it once and like, as I said before, you'll feel like you want to throw up. I was like, ugh, when I first started being direct, I was like, oh my God, people think I'm so rude. People are going to hate me. Everyone's going to think I've changed. And I had to like sit with that and be like, people might. And that's okay because it's what I want to be like and it's who I want to be. And there's going to be a number of people who don't like that, but they're going to be the people that were probably benefiting from my people pleasing. So, but I had to like really get comfortable with discomfort and hard to do.
It is so important you
so
brought that up. And the reason it's important is because I didn't recognize until some of the training I did that it is. So there is a lot of people out there that say, just go through that discomfort. And I love what you've said about sitting with it. And I call it befriending your biology. And it is literally, and one of my clients said it beautifully one day and she said, it's like putting an arm around this, and we know it's your inner, your little baby, you, whatever. It is just putting your arm around, you know what, we're going to be fine. Yeah. It's going to be fine. Now, this might seem kooky to people, but if you're going to make change, this is what you have to do. But you are so spot on. It's befriending
The part.
That part of your biology which is wired and created to keep you safe, just
Yeah.
overriding, go, I actually know better.
I
know
literally
better.
will close my eyes and go,
Mm,
oh, who's saying that? Who's
mm,
saying, who's just gone into chaos? Who's gone, no one's going to like you and no one's going to love you and everyone's going to leave you, and who's that? And then I close my eyes and I see who's speaking, and it's a little version of me. And then I'm like, hey, people will still love you. People will still like you. I love you. Let's just do the thing, and then kind of move on, from there.
Yeah.
But cool. All right. So that was, so our summary here, we've gone on some tangents, but our summary here is really that, like, start to create the new habits. First of all, pinpoint the desires. Look at people that you love, the attributes that you love about them. Look at people who are living the dream life that you want. What is it about that life? Is it where they're living, or is it the freedom? Is it how they're showing up? Are they more confident? Are they speaking clearly? Like, really start to get down to the details of what it is that you're desiring to be. Then we want to start to just take little steps towards becoming that version. And when you feel that resistance, sitting in it and feeling it and noticing it, looking at the part that's coming up, and then working with loving that part, really, essentially, so that it can start to, because it does transform. It does transform. Amazing. So very quickly, I just want you to tell me, because this podcast is for brave women, I want you to tell me the bravest, most vulnerable thing that you have done.
I have done a lot of brave things in my life, and the one thing that stood out in more recent times was when I was having first time ever recognised for me a full-blown mental health burnout. And I was being paid in the wellness industry to run programs across 1,000 staff, and here was me who literally could not go to work. So I have to say that moment where I took the leap and rang my boss and said, I literally can't come into work. And it's like, oh, no, well, it's like, no, you don't get it. I actually can't. I physically can't leave the house right now. That was a huge catalyst for me. But I was reflecting on it recently and thought, if I hadn't done that, I would never have woken up and become, you are seeing about 90, and this is really honest too to say, you're probably seeing about 95% of me. I still hold back on the real me. All of us will always hold back in certain times to keep ourselves safe. But that whole catalyst of my health and losing my ego through that process, and then really waking up to just, owning it, and then the process of becoming my real self has led me where I am now. So that was in 2017.
Amazing. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is hard to admit when you have that pattern, and when it would have been so hard to make that call. So thank you. We're running out of time. Like to keep these short and direct and to the point, but thank you so much for coming on. It's been so good chatting, and I'm sure when I come back up to the Gold Coast, you'll be coming on again.
Love that.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jess.
Thanks again for listening. And if you know somebody who struggles with this, please share it, send it on. Yeah. Thanks for listening.